In this demo, I just want to walk through some of the features of a character rig that I built from scratch in Maya for a client who wanted to be able to animate his characters in an easier way than he would be able to with just the standard FK and IK features that come out of the box. So I'm going to start in the center of her body and grab this dark blue plus shaped object. Now if I move this around, her upper body moves with it, and her feet are going to stay in place wherever they are, and her legs will be affected through their IK chains so that the knees will bend in order to accommodate the difference between the two spots. Next, we have this light blue anvil shaped object. Now if I grab that and rotate it, it will pivot her hips from that point in such a way that the feet will stay in place and the IK chains for the legs will accommodate the difference once again. Moving up to the torso, if we grab this dark blue football shaped object here and rotate that, it's going to spread the rotations throughout all the bones in the spine such that the spine will curl evenly. Now if we grab one of these light blue objects, what that's going to do is curve the spine, but only between the hips and the upper body. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's just for slight adjustments. And any of these objects is going to curl that spine from that point up towards the shoulders, but the top shoulder area is not going to move. Now if we move these objects, it will also affect the spine between the hips and the shoulders. Take a quick look at the arms. We've got some cubes out here that will affect the arms IK chain, pretty standard there. But I put some egg-shaped objects in between the wrist and the shoulder. And if we rotate that object, that's going to affect the direction in which the elbow points. It's going to point in the same direction as the sort of tip of the egg there. And if we don't like animating that way, we can actually move these star-shaped objects here up and down, which is a little bit more standard way to direct the positioning of the elbow. So one of the more nifty features of the arm setup, we've got this other object here for rotation, which is pretty standard. We can rotate the wrists on all the different axes. However, if we rotate the twist, for this particular client, when I set this up, he wanted all of the wrist twist to happen at this forearm joint, which if I template the model, you can see there's a joint in between the elbow and the wrist, and that's where he wanted 100% of the twist to take place. But what was happening was the arm was sort of sausaging. So what I did was I built in another animatable set-driven key, which will allow the twist of the forearm to be animatably spread between the forearm and the wrist. We can set it to 100% at the forearm, we can set it to 100% happening at the wrist, or somewhere in between. And by default, it's set to right in the middle. One last thing about the wrist setup, I've got these glove-shaped objects out here, and what those are for is sticking the hand to a club or a weapon or some object, a table, a chair, another person's arm that's outside of the character's hierarchy. So normally, if I move the character from the waist, let's say, and her feet will stay in place, but her wrists will move with the rest of the body in the standard setup. But I've got another set-driven key here where I can animate, once again, such that the hand will now be following this glove-shaped object, which is outside of the hierarchy. So now, when I move the character from the center, her hand is going to stay in place. So if she were to be resting a hand on a table, something like that, you can see the normal wrist control objects here are moving with the rest of the body, but her hand is actually staying in place now, and we can blend that on and off. Now let's move in on the character's feet. If we grab the master control object for the foot and move that around, it's going to affect her leg through an IK chain. Now her foot will stay flat on this object, but her knee will move and bend in order to accommodate where we put her foot, and her hips are going to stay in the same place. Now the knees are controlled by pole vectors just like the elbows were. We can either affect those by rotating these egg-shaped objects or by moving these star-shaped objects around, either way. Now the rest of the foot is controlled by a classic, what's called a reverse boot. And we have it set up so if we want her to roll up onto her toe, we can rotate this object here, and it'll affect the IK chain from the ball of the foot up towards the hip. Zoom in a little bit and do that again. Now we've also got another pivot set up at the toe, so that if we want her to go up onto her toe, that too will affect the IK chain all the way through the leg. So we can pivot her up on her toe and have her hip stay in place and her toe stay in place, but the rest of the leg will be affected. Now the only other thing that I've added to this reverse IK boot is a toe tap, what I call toe tap function. So we can actually adjust the rotation of the toe without affecting the IK of the chain if we want to do that. And all these things are interchangeable and all work together. One problem with animating with IK chains is that as the chain of bones comes close to being into a straight line, the chain will often snap into and out of that straight position, and it can look a little weird when you're trying to do a walk cycle or something like that, where the legs often come in and out of being straight. So behind the scenes for this rig, I built in a sort of dampening mechanism for both the elbows and the knees, and as the leg comes close to being into a straight line, it'll sort of gently ease into that position rather than snapping as the normal IK chain in Maya would do.